Okay, now it's time for Team of the Week for this special edition, obviously because of the end of the June Joust. It's the playoffs week 9. So we saw our champions crowned, the Shanghai Dragons. Congratulations to them. And they did very, very well. It's going to obviously heavily impact our Team of the Week for that week. And it's going to mean that, yes, it gets kind of dominated by certain people. That's kind of an issue when it comes to these really small tournaments when you're picking out a bunch of 4 teams, especially when 2 teams do quite poorly, like New York and Atlanta did in the end. It becomes a little bit of an issue when it comes to diversity within the Team of the Week, and that's why you normally see more diversity in Team of the Weeks during the regular part and the qualifiers of these tournaments. But we are going to, as ever, pick 6 players. That is what we always do. 1 for the main support, 1 for the flex support, 1 for the off tank, 1 for the main tank, 1 for the flex DPS, 1 for the hit scan. And it gets a little bit murky at times depending on what teams play, but obviously we're picking out of the New York Excelsior, the Atlanta Reign, the Dallas Fuel, and the Shanghai Dragons out of this one because that's the only 4 teams we've seen. So we've got a very limited hero pool, player pool, as I just said. But we are going to start off with our main squad as we always do. This, for me, is between 2 people. Yes, Massa did okay for Atlanta Reign, and I suppose Friday existed for New York. Again, Friday was probably the weakest main support in this tournament. I think we can all agree with that. But it's between Jexer and Lige Gon, and Lige Gon, again, has really impressed me. I am going to give it to Lige Gon. I think people might be... they might be a little bit down on that, but Jexer, in my opinion, just doesn't quite have what Lige Gon has. Even though Dallas Fuel did lose to the Shanghai Dragons in the final, obviously, that's not an impact on this. Not an impact on this at all. It is just that Jexer, for me, gets picked off a little bit more. Does a little bit less than Lige Gon. Whereas Lige Gon, he's always there, he's always doing stuff, he's always consistent at the moment this season. And he is, in my opinion, the best main support in the league. Because we don't see Funny Astro right now. We may get to see Funny Astro soon. It would be cool if we do. But right now, the best main support in the league is Lige Gon. And he continued to prove that this weekend. And he's essential to the Shanghai Dragons team. Yeah, absolutely essential. And it's quite poignant, isn't it? Considering now we've lost Runaway. They will always have an extreme imprint on high-level Overwatch. And Lige Gon is one of them. One of the best main supports in the world, founded by Flower, Vin, and Runner. And I think he really deserves this Team of the Week. I think his ults are on point. Great players ever, always chipping in, especially on that Lucio. And then, when we switch him over, when we see him switch over to Brig, and when we see him switch over to the Mercy, he's not looking outdone. He's not a Lucio one-trick, which some people I think sometimes worry about with Lige Gon, because he's so darn good on Lucio, that he lacks on other supports. Similar thing with Funny Astro at times, but no, they don't. They are still fantastic, and I think he deserves this just over Jexer, although Jexer it's nothing to be, down about. Jexer did have a really good weekend as well, and I wouldn't take that away from him. I just think Lige Gon's been that little bit better. Now, however, we go over to the flex support. Iris, again, has been great for the Atlanta Reign this weekend. Jonak actually had a pretty darn good weekend, actually. Jonak's pretty up there in terms of statistics. His healing output's really good. The person we always see top of the healing outputs usually is Fielder. Why is that? Because he's usually playing the Moira, and Moira is insane burst healing, and the way Dallas play, it just enables that insane burst healing and have a high recovery rate. So he's just outputting more healing, usually Fielder, just to the nature in which the way Dallas play and the comps they play and the heroes they're played. So that's why very often Fielder will top out those damage and healing statistics. But Fielder was great this weekend, don't get me wrong, but Fielder was then countered by Shanghai Dragons. He was heavily dove, hard dive with the ball, Fate's ball, it's been fantastic. And it heavily countered Fielder. He started to get picked off. This is the first time we've seen Fielder so heavily focused. And in the end, I don't want to say it cost Dallas, but Dallas didn't know how to adjust to being quite pummeled in this way. And Rush has mentioned that, the ball hard dive may be a counter to what Dallas are doing. But, again, if you knew this was a counter, why did you not have a prep to, counter the counter, if you see what I mean? So I think Fielder actually comes up a little bit short this weekend. A little bit short to Izayaki. Izayaki is very inconsistent in my opinion. In my opinion, he's one of the most, if not the most inconsistent flex supports in the league. Because he's either really darn good, but he gets these times when he's just so bad. So bad. And with most flex supports, you're either consistently rubbish or you're consistently good. And with Izayaki, he can be up and down. But what I have noticed with Izayaki is he's getting a lot better at consistently performing to a high level. We have seen, I think, one match where Izayaki has just been down bad in terms of his flex support play. But one match out of 2 months, you can't really complain about that. We all have off days. I think he's tightening up his game. Izayaki really did hold well against Fielder during these matches. Yes, Fielder had the better of it in the first match, Shanghai versus Dallas, but in the final, Izayaki stepped up. He's now starting to step up when we expect him to. He may not be topping out the statistics compared to other supports in the June Joust finals. Why? Because Izayaki showed us a much wider range of hero pool than even Fielder did, because we saw much more Ana from Izayaki and things like that. So this is what we want to see, and that's why I'm going to give it to Izayaki this time around. And he did also top out the final blows by quite a margin, so that's also cool as well. The in-game adaptation for him to switch to Moira, and then also, keep up and if not outdo the Fielder Moira. Most people would say that Fielder is the best Moira in the league right now. So that's also something we have to hold to very big account for Izayaki this weekend. I think he's done fantastically, and I think he's stepping up really well compared to his counterparts. And this is what needed to happen for Shanghai. You needed to take a look at the Dallas Fuel and look at Fearless and look at Fielder and Hanbin and Lip and Sparkle and Doha, not Lip. And the Shanghai needed to look at it and say, okay, we can step up and match these and outdo them. And that's what they did in the final, and that's what got them a result in the end. Good coaching and players stepping up has really, really propelled the Shanghai Dragons to this June Joust win. So this is why Shanghai Dragons are going to be held in very high regard during this Team of the Week. So Leisure Gone and Izayaki. Now we're going to move on to our off tank. Our off tank, again, is a tight one, because the stats work in Hanbin's favour, actually. Hanbin has been getting out there, final blows, eliminations, hero damage, stuff like that. He's also lowest on deaths, which is great for Hanbin. I think Hanbin's had a great weekend. Again, we don't take it away from the likes of Hawk. Hawk's been great. Bianca has also been good, but Bianca's, kind of been out of his depths a little bit, I would say. Hawk maybe as well, to an extent. But, again, it's going to go to Shanghai Dragons and Void. Why does it go to Void over Hanbin? That's the question. Well, it goes to Void over Hanbin because Void has been keeping up with Hanbin in terms of the stats pretty much. But not just that. It's also the fact that I think Void this weekend was a little bit more clutch. A little bit more clutch. Whether that comes down to luck or excel in play, that is, a debate you can have forever. But, in my opinion, Void was that little bit more clutch than Hanbin this weekend, which saw the Shanghai Dragons over the line. It is a purely on weekend basis, next time around you could see them flip again. It wouldn't surprise me, to be quite honest. They're two fantastic players. But this time I think it goes to Void. I really, really do. And then we're going to move on to our main tank. This is where it continues to be a little bit weird, because we have lauded Fearless in this season so far. Fearless has been the pinnacle of main tank play. But for the first time this season, Fearless looked lost. At times, he looked lost. Going back to the others, obviously, Yakpung and Gator, they've been fine. They've been good. I wouldn't say they've been great. Yakpung actually by far the highest deaths per 10 minutes this weekend. But then that's the nature in which, what happened with the NYXL this weekend happened. They didn't play well, and so very often your main tank is going to have a much higher death per 10 minutes than the others. That just happens, right? But Fearless is the pinnacle of main tank play at the moment, but for this weekend, for the first time, he got showed up. He got exposed. And we started to see Fearless and Dallas panic and not know what to do. We'd not seen the Fearless, Winston one trick. We ended up seeing Fearless forced off of the Winston onto the Wrecking Ball, one of his most uncomfortable roles in the entire, Overwatch tank base, right? We knew the Fearless Ball last year was not great, hence the Shanghai Dragons played Stand 1 on Ball. And then we see, when that doesn't work, we see him roll out on the Roadhog, and they end up going things like Roadhog Diva on Eichenwald. Very unconventional, and it just, you saw a panic. Fearless did get value from the Hog in that very brief moment where he played it, but his team overall just failed. And yeah, it's the first time we've seen Dallas on the rocks, right, really majorly on the rocks. And it's going to be interesting to see quite how they bounce back from this. I am, however, going to give it to Fate. I cannot not give it to Fate. His Wrecking Ball play was, honestly, that's some of the best Wrecking Ball play we've ever seen in the Overwatch League in that final against Dallas Fuel. His pile drives were amazing and so heavily well coordinated with his team. Dallas did not know how to deal with it. They did not know how to deal with it. And we did not see Dallas have the opportunity to go to Sombra. Sombra could have countered the Wrecking Ball quite well, but there's no Sombra in the hero pool, so they couldn't play Sombra. And then Dallas's reluctance to go to hit scan, especially McCree. They still had no Pine, we still no Pine. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but then Sombra, McCree, you're taking two massive counters to Wrecking Ball out of the equation for Dallas Fuel. And so it became much more difficult to get value for the team comp in general. And so Fate got a lot of value. A lot of value. He was by far better than Fearless on Ball, in my opinion. Fate he was just so good this weekend. He stepped it up as well. He didn't look great at the start of the weekend, but you saw a slow progression. And that's something we have to also take into account for the Shanghai Dragons team. They started off the weekend losing 3-0 to Dallas Fuel. It looked like it was going to go south major. And then, as the weekend moved on, we saw improvement from the Shanghai Dragons team to the point at which they were able to beat the Dallas Fuel 4-3 in the final. And that, over that course of that period of time, to learn a comp, master it, and then be able to be the best, that is insane. That is really insane. And we have to give a lot of credit to that. But Fate pioneered and was the pinnacle of that comp with his ball play, without a doubt. And so I give my main tank spot to Fate. And we had our doubts about Fate coming into the season. Coming in from the Florida Mayhem, could he quite be the main tank that Shanghai needed to replace Fearless? Well, he's proved those doubters wrong this weekend. That's for sure. But now we're moving on to our DPS. We're going to go for the more hit-scanny sort of DPS this time. And again, we have some people to mention here. Guangbong actually won the Widow 1v1. I mentioned that. But Kai, when Kai subs in for Atlanta Reign, he just looks great. He honestly just looks great. And that's exactly what Atlanta Reign need. And then we see Edison. Edison's great and all, but when Kai steps in and plays that long range hit scan, you know you're in for a good time, right? You know you're in for a good viewing. Eventually I will be able to speak English. Believe it or not, that's my first language. But again, it comes down to two people. It comes to Doha and Lip. We saw a lot of McCree from a lot of Reaper from these guys, because we saw a lot of Reaper Echo. And when I compare them like for like, Lip, he got caught out a bit for me, for my liking. I think Lip got caught out a little bit. He was one of the weaker components on the Shanghai Dragons this weekend, in my opinion. Lee Jae-gon looked great. Izayaki looked great. Fate looked great. Void looked great. They all looked great. Lip, he was just that little bit. He was good. Not great. In my opinion, Lip got caught out a little bit too much, whereas Doha got a lot of value. He still got a lot of value, even being on the losing side in the final. I felt a bit sorry for Doha. I think he did really well. And in my opinion, he got caught out less on the Reaper. In the comp that this Reaper is being played in, he's being played more dive, more risky, things like that. And if you get caught with no cooldowns as Reaper, you are dead. even though you have the lifesteal, but at the OWL level you will be dead. And for me, that happened to Lip more times than it happened to Doha. And so I'm going to give this hit scan spot to Doha. Even though Doha is not your legit hit scan with the McCree in the back pocket and the Widow and things like that, I'm going to give it to Doha. Because I think he got more value than Lip in the end. But it was very, very close. But when we come to our flex DPS, again, we start getting drawn into this Pelican. Pelican had a great lead up to this tournament, but when it's come to this tournament, he still looked good, but not quite good enough to really compete with the biggest of the biggest in the league in terms of flex DPS. So it's kind of come short. Again, NYXL not been quite there with their DPS either. Ivy especially, he looked a little bit rough. But again, of course, it comes down to Fletter and Sparkle. Sparkle. Very often Dallas play around Phyllis or Sparkle. Sparkle will play the Echo, or he will play the Doomfist, or he will play the Genji. Generally things like that. 2 very good value. But this weekend, he got less value. Why? Because Fletter returned to his MVP form. Fletter looked fantastic on whatever he played, but especially the Echo. We are spoiled when we see Fletter on the Echo, and you just love watching it. So, Fletter, he may not have been the difference maker for the Shanghai Dragons this weekend. In my opinion, he really wasn't the difference maker. The DPS, on a whole, were not the difference makers for Shanghai Dragons this weekend. It was team coordination and great main tank play and adaptation from Fate. In my opinion, Fate was the best player for Shanghai Dragons this weekend. However, Fletter was really, really good at following up on what Fate was doing. And that's exactly what you want in a ball dive comp. You need to have that follow-up on the pile drive. You need to get that damage in, because you need to get a pick from that pile drive. Because if it doesn't happen, then you are going to be left in the setup phase once again. You're giving up space to the enemy team. You are basically putting yourself on the back foot if you don't get that early engage and the early pick from the engage. And how do you do that? Well, generally, your DPS, so in this case maybe the Reaper Echo or the Tracer Echo or something like that, goes in with the Wrecking Ball, and they will get the pick. And providing that happens, you will win most of your team fights, because 5v6 most of the time, especially at that level, you will win. And Fletter was incredibly good at following up on those engages. Really, really, really good. It's part and parcel of Fletter's play, and he looked fantastic this weekend. Sparkle, no, not to take away from him, but we started to see the Doomfist and the Genjis get less value. And when you put Fletter and Sparkle in an Echo matchup, Fletter is most likely going to win that. Although Sparkle is a good Echo, Fletter is a better Echo. When you go to Genji Doomfist, Sparkle's going to win it. Of course. But as soon as you move to a comp that's not going to get value in, and he has to go back to the Echo, he's forced into the Echo mirror, we see Fletter come out on top. That's without a doubt. So Fletter's going to get it this time around. That does mean that there are a ton of Shanghai Dragons players in this team of the week. I can only apologize for that, but they've been so good, and the in-game adaptation's been fantastic, and I can't really deny them the spots. Plus, again, with that reduced player pool, it makes it very hard to make this very diverse. So, team of the week is Lige, Gon, Izayaki, Void, Fate, Doha, and Fletter. Week off for the Overwatch League now. We will be doing some more power rankings, probably a meta preview of the non-hero pooled month we're coming up for the Summer Showdown, where things are going to get really interesting, because we're starting, London Spitfire have got Sparkle now, and they've moved Hybrid down to the British Hurricane. So that means that we're expecting a slightly stronger London Spitfire, and they will be going up against weaker opponents like the Paris Eternal. This is where we need to start seeing some teams pick up some notable performances, some wins. This is where we finally decide, if London get off of the bottom, off of the 0 points, nil points. This is when we start to see that sort of debate come in. And obviously, same for Vancouver and people like that, because do we see London play Vancouver this month or next month? One or the other. So that'll obviously be another massive match in terms of who's going to finish this league where. And we're at the halfway point right now, and I think there is a distinct possibility that we do see a West team finish with no wins. Now, the reason I say West is because we expected the Valiant not to get any wins on the board. But a West team, Vancouver and London, I could see a nil point coming up for one of those teams. I really could. It worries me that it might be London. And if London are to avoid that, they must get value out of Sparker. They must. Because otherwise, it's going to be rough. But I've gone off on a tangent. What a surprise. I am going to leave it here for this one. All the socials are linked in the video description as ever for Illusion Gaming and myself. Make sure you give the Twitters a follow, make sure you give the Twitch a follow, and make sure you join the Discords if you want to have a nice chat. And don't call me names that are really, really not nice, because you'll probably get banned, because that's very insulting and not very nice. But you know, things happen. Be nice people, spread the love. But I will be leaving it here for now. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you'd like to give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.